So the purpose of this video is a review. I've been meaning to do some for a wee while now, and I'm going to take a look at this. This is the Black+Decker Power File, or KA900E, that I've had now for about 10 years. So I'll take you through the tool, quick explanation of some things I use it for, and whether I think it's any good or not. Take a couple of minutes. So a quick look at the tool itself. Obviously you've got the handle here, the motor and the gears in there, and your arm here that holds the files, a release here to change the files, and an outlet here for any bits and pieces that might get caught off the work and need to get flung out there, and finally the trigger mechanism here. For its day-to-day use, this version by Black+Decker, there are others by other companies. They all more or less weigh the same sort of thing, the same sort of weight and the same sort of size. But for its day-to-day use, the thing you'll be doing most of obviously is using the trigger, varying the speeds here. I think we can go up to 7 as its max. I tend to keep it on 5 for most of my work. Seems to work well. I don't think I've ever really changed that. But what you'll be doing the most of is changing this. Sometimes it can be a peg, guarantee this will be one, but all you do is push that pulls the arm towards you, and then you work your file out. Now I'm keeping this one because I've not long changed it, but ordinarily to save time, just cut these, take them out, get your fresh one. Check the fresh one, often they have arrows. This moves in a clockwise direction, so make sure that's working well for you. All it does is it just makes the belt last a bit longer. Put it on, bring that back and just give it a quick fire. If the belt's moving, it can sometimes slide off. You've got a little tracking bit here to change the angle of the arm so that you don't lose the band there as you're going. I've used and abused this particular power file now for getting on close to 10 years through all sorts of different uses. But the only bit of maintenance that I've ever done on it, I'm sure there's probably more I should have done, but is just replace this arm. This little wheel at the front here, its bearing went and it kept falling off. So Black+Decker are pretty good for their parts. I went online, found this part, so rather than buy a new unit, I replaced this part for about £10, and it's the only thing I've had to do to it. To get to it, all you got to do is undo this screw, take that arm off, and the little tracking piece at the back here that I showed you earlier, you unscrew that, the arm comes out of its socket, you put the fresh one in, screw it back on, and then just do that back in place and you're ready to play. The only other day-to-day piece, well, month-to-month piece, is to replace this, I think it's rubber or whatever it is. But you just take those off, you stick a fresh one on in its little receiver there, and it just stops the metal arm gouging the work a little bit as you go. So that's all I've kind of done on a day-to-day basis to look after it. So it's a pretty hardy tool, to be fair. I've done nothing special to look after it. It's been abused in the workshop, thrown about in its day-to-day use, and it's withstood that punishment very well. When I first got this, this was almost my principal cleaning rig when I started to try and remove coatings from metal like this. I don't use it for it now, but it was a cheap way of doing it, and the advice from a chap, Russ Thomas, was to get hold of one. It was a cheap way, a cheap solution to the problem that I found. So just to show you really quick, these are some gauntlets I'm going to be working on gradually, but just to show you on this edge here, obviously it comes with the coating that's on it. This hasn't been planished or anything, but what you can do is just pass the tool over and you can get that first clean back if you don't have specialist equipment. So just to show that it can work for that sort of thing, a bit more care obviously, I've not bothered with the edges here because this isn't a polishing video, but just to show you it can work really well and take that back. And if you keep some of your older belts, if they've not broken through, you can, it's about the equivalent of about a 120 grit if you've bought 60 grits by the time they've chewed back, and you can give armour a really quick polish and check quite quickly whether you've planished things. So the tool can save you quite a bit of time on that, because obviously if I have to planish bits on this, you can see the divots more easily. But it saves firing up any grinders and bits and pieces, polishing equipment, or if you don't even own it, it's a great way of that first step. So another use I use them for, the power file for, is removal of rivets, particularly difficult to get ones. On a piece like this, I don't want to be messing around on the front filing because it's finished and I might wreck the finish. And I just perhaps put something in the wrong place, or I need to make an alteration, whatever it is, whatever reason. You can see on the inside here, there's the wrist rivet that's locking this piece to this piece. It's really difficult to get in there with a drill. I don't like drilling rivets because you end up with different holes sometimes. So a power file, again, touched in there a few times, will bring that rivet head down. Not too bothered if I scratch the inside, because I'll likely paint it or treat it or do something with it, or just ignore it. And we haven't affected the outside, so it's great for rivet removal. Absolutely fantastic, reaching those hard to reach places to take those out. When you're working, often with cutters and so on, you'll end up with burrs, little catches, and you want to remove them obviously for the customer, but when you're working for yourself as well, you don't want to be bleeding all over the equipment because you've cut and nicked yourself. So the tool here is great for mimicking what a file will do. So with a file, I can take that across. I'm not labouring it too much. It tends to be how you do it with the file if it's handy. But with the power file, it's as quick as this. And that edge there is nice and rounded, ready to go. And equally, if I wanted to take a corner off of here, you can just give that a couple of passes. Use it almost like a linisher. Get it spinning, and you just touch the work to it. Don't want to do too much though, because I don't know quite where I'm at with these yet, but you get the picture. Nice for that sort of work. So a quick word on the belts themselves. I forget the size they are. It's written on the side of this somewhere if I haven't rubbed it off. Yeah, it's just about been rubbed off the bottom there, so I can't read it anymore. But I tend to look it up when I order them because I always forget. But anyway, a word on belts. Cheaper isn't necessarily always better. You do get what you pay for with belts most of the time. For the generalist work I do, the sort of middle priced ones work. I bought some really cheap ones from a supplier, and it wasn't the supplier's fault. They just stocked some cheap ones, some medium priced ones and some expensive ones, and I thought I'd push my luck for the cheap, and they just flew to pieces. So have an experiment, see what works for you in the sort of work you're doing. Generally I tend to keep this at about a 60 grit, I think it is, or maybe even an 80. I can't see it written on there, but about a 60 or 80 grit tends to work well for the general cleaning up of edges and so on that I use this sort of thing for. So like I say, cheap isn't always better. Have an experiment and you'll easily find a belt supplier and a belt type that you're satisfied with that works for a device like this. Now, I'm sure we've all got those people that come to the workshop, will say they don't mean to disturb us, and will then continue to talk to us for 3 hours whilst we've got to get on with our work. This tool is perfect to reach for in that case because you can't hear a single thing. So all in all, I would put this on my indispensable list for the modern armourer. Great for taking rivets and burrs off of stuff. It's a great starting place for for cleaning armour back. It works so well for it, to be honest. If you can't afford specialist equipment and you're getting going, this is a great tool for that. Really handy to use. The parts are quite cheap and the belts are even cheaper. So I would give this a 4 out of 5, because I don't like to give a 5 out of 5 for things, but it would certainly get 4.5 out of 5. How's that? It's really useful, worth your time. Have a look. I mean, I'm sure Makita, DeWalt, all of the big names, they make their own, but the Black+Decker was cheap enough, and it's withstood 10 years of almost daily use in this workshop. So why not? Let's give it 4.7 out of 5. A really good tool and worth your money.